Now, I want to first get your take on the executive order that came down yesterday restricting H-1B visas. Now, Silicon Valley has pushed back, and that's not surprising given how many in big tech rely on these kinds of employees. If you take a look at some of the biggest names, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, among the companies that rely on them the most. So what does this order mean, not just for them, but the tech pipeline, the startup ecosystem?
No, these kinds of efforts by the administration really hurt the level of innovation in the country. These well-qualified immigrants will go elsewhere and innovate elsewhere. But beyond just a labor pool or a talent pool, many startups are started by immigrant founders, something like 40%. And so that innovation doesn't happen in the U.S., and that's a real job creation engine. If you look at the last decade or two, it's a large part of new tech employment created is from the innovation ecosystem and with many immigrant founders and immigrant employees.
Now, Vinod, who might this advantage then? You say that founders might go somewhere else. And we know that we're in the midst of, trade tension between the U.S. and China. And China's leading the way in a lot of next generation technologies, arguably 5G, perhaps AI and facial recognition. So what are the long-term effects?
Well, China is a really competitive economy when it comes to technology. And they're well supported by their government, unlike U.S. tech. And so we are at a competitive disadvantage. There are other centers of excellence in technical innovation coming up in India, in Bangalore, in Israel, in parts of Europe. So it will disadvantage the U.S.
Hey, Vinod, good morning. It's John Fort. I want to ask you about the state of startups in the Valley and investment. I saw this morning Intuit's laying off 715 employees, 7% of its workforce. We hear about startup layoffs as well. We were talking about Airbnb yesterday. Are we continuing to see mass layoffs and even startups shutting down, or have things stabilized out there?
Well, adjustments are still continuing. I don't think anybody knows where the COVID pandemic goes in September or October. Most people are expecting a second surge. So what that does to the economy, people are not able to predict very accurately, so that will change. But here's the surprising fact. The more layoffs there are, there's more entrepreneurs created. People who were working on their dream projects at a larger company, or people who were working on fairly advanced projects that may not have revenue relevance in the next year or two, are the ones who do the best, most ambitious startups. So I do think the amount of startup activity will actually do well in the next year or so.
But are we
counterintuitive as it sounds?
I hear that. I wonder, is Silicon Valley experiencing a pullback or kind of a devastating moment? The dot-com bust wasn't just one of those opportunities for entrepreneurs. It was like fear and loathing out there. I remember, people were depressed, people were leaving en masse. Has it reached that level yet? Do you think it's heading there, or is this just for the moment at least a pullback?
I think if you look at fundamental new investing, it won't change radically over the next year or two. That means startup funding for the $5 to $10 to $20 million kinds of financing rounds, which is the domain we work in. In fact, I suspect the demand for that activity will increase and more people will leave the larger tech companies and do their own startups, follow their dreams. I think that's likely to happen. If I take a 5-year perspective, I don't see the number of startups declining in the next 5 years. What you're calling tech is a particular segment that really isn't the startup world. It's the tech part of the big company world. And there is cutbacks there. I think they're pretty public, what the layoffs that have been announced. So I do see the startup ecosystem flourishing through this, not suffering from it, especially if you take a 5-year view.